Hello, this is Robert Kiyosaki, and I'm very happy, excited, and I'm going to be talking today about this here. It's called emergency. So I'm happy to be speaking to you because my favorite subject really is capitalism, and I'm concerned today because the world is in a state of emergency. So what has happened, give you some history of this whole thing, is in 1965, I left Hawaii, where I grew up. I'm fourth generation Japanese American, and which means I don't speak Japanese. I speak English. I flunked out of school because I can't speak English well either. But anyway, so 1965, I read this book here. I went to school in New York, and I went to military school. And in military school, they study different subjects, not like snowflake school, not like Harvard or Stanford or Berkeley. At military school, we had to read this book here. So in 1965, I'm 18 years old, go all the way from Hawaii to New York, and I read this book here. This book is only about 50 pages, but everybody should read it because the emergency in the world today was predicted in this book here. So this was 1848, and we're in serious, serious trouble because, as most of you know, throughout the world today, we're becoming Marxist. And that's the emergency here. So I'll give you a little bit of my background for those who may not know. So I read this book here in 1965. In 1997, I published this book here, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And this is a capitalist tool. The way you fight back against these guys here, communism, is you fight with capitalism. And that's why I wrote this book here. And then that was 97. In 96, created this board game here, the cash flow board game. And I'll explain this later on. But the way you fight back against communism is with capitalism. But the problem is, after I read this book here, again in 1965, I'm 18 years old, I realized most of my family are communists. They're good people, don't get me wrong. You know, communism is kind of like an economic religion. So a communist will believe that you should just give everybody money. You know, it's called DEIE, diversity, D, inclusion, and equality. To me, it spells die. We all die when we do that because that's what communism teaches here. And we're in an emergency right now because our schools teach us nothing about money, capitalism. Rich Dad is an education company. We don't sell anything but educational products, but people have got to want to study. So I want to prove I know what I'm talking about here. I wrote this book here in 2013, 2013. And it's called Rich Dad's Prophecy. And I said why the biggest stock market crash in history is still coming and how you can prepare for it. This has got to be changed. The biggest stock market crash in history isn't coming. It's here today. That's why we're in emergency. Let me just say this much. The world is going to go into a depression. Millions will lose their jobs, unfortunately. Like in America today, the banks are laying off people because people are not applying for loans anymore. You know, housing market is crashing. The problem with the housing market crashing throughout the world, it happened in 2008. But what happened after 2008, instead of fixing the problem, and this came out in 2013, they just printed more money. They made the problem worse. And that's why I said here, the biggest stock market crash in history is still coming. It's now here. We're crashing. The problem with real estate is like a sinkhole. You know, it takes everything with it. A stock market crash, big deal. You know, a few people lose their jobs and all this stuff. But when real estate crashes, it takes everything with it. And we're in an emergency today because what do our schools teach us about money? Nothing. So I wrote this book here with another friend of mine. His name is Ted Siddell. The biggest crime in history is taking place as we speak today is that Wall Street and our governments are stealing our pensions. So that means my generation, baby boomer, 75 years old. We don't have pensions today. They stole them. My classmates, I went to flight school. I flew for the U.S. Marine Corps. Many of my friends became pilots, and they flew for like United Airlines. So my friends who were pilots for United Airlines, they were all happy because they had a pension. Well, what happened to my friends is somebody stole their pensions. And you're going to find out this emergency is going to get worse because you're going to be hearing about it in the news. You heard it from me. That what's going to happen is the pensions are going broke. Now, the biggest pension in America is with the teachers' unions. But as you know, we don't teach us anything about money at school. So most teachers go to school and they want to get a pension. So in California, it's called CalPERS. CalPERS is one of the biggest pensions in America. It's broke. So all of these school teachers, like my poor dad, who didn't know they were communists, I'm not saying they're bad people. You know, you can be a communist, you can be a Marxist, you can be a socialist, you can be a fascist. They're economic religions is all they are. They're just different religions. So like you can be Christian, you can be Buddhist, you can be Muslim, you can be Catholic. They're just religions. That's what this book's about here. So the pensions are gone. Now all those school teachers like my poor dad who believe that, you know, they believe in diversity, inclusion, and equality, but they never touch anything about money. I think we're all dying because we're in an emergency today, because we never taught anybody about money at school, which is why I wrote this book here. So I went to military school in New York. I flew for the U.S. Marine Corps in Vietnam twice. And when I came back from Vietnam, I got spit on by the teachers, you know, because they called us baby killers and all this stuff. And I realized then, exactly as this book said, in 1848, what happened in 1930, according to this book here, it said communism would come in two steps. Okay. The first step happened in 1930 when the Frankfurt School of Germany sent teachers to Columbia University in New York City. And that's when the rioting started all across America. So that was in 1930. In 1972, I come back from Vietnam, I'm getting spit on by students because we don't teach anybody about money, and today we're in an emergency. But it started with this book here. So I wrote this book here, Capitalist Manifesto. It is to counter, say this, the way you fight communism is with capitalism. The good news is the capitalists are going to get richer. Unfortunately, 80% of the world's population will get poorer. So let me give you an example how I'm getting richer. Number one is I don't invest in the stock market. I'm not saying you should invest in the stock market. I don't. But I'm a capitalist. I can create my own assets. I don't need to buy Standard Oil stock. I don't need to buy BP. I don't need to buy anybody's stock. So what I do instead, because I'm a capitalist, is I invest in oil wells. I'm an entrepreneur. I don't buy oil stocks. Although I worked for Standard Oil, I don't buy Standard Oil stock. I don't have to because I'm a capitalist. The Capitalist Manifesto. So I own oil wells. So my oil wells, I don't own stock. I don't own Standard Oil, don't own BP. I'm a capitalist, okay? So what happened, I have oil wells in North Dakota, Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma. You know, when the middle class is sitting there, they're filling up the gas tanks in their cars. They can't afford the gas. Now, oil also affects food. Because how do you grow food? Because food comes from oil. And not only that, you know, like I always say to people, if you want to invest in something valuable, buy a can of tuna. And they go, why would you buy tuna? I said, because tuna fish in a can is a derivative of oil, diesel. So the fishing boats go out, they're burning diesel, and they catch tuna, and they put it in this can. To me, the can of tuna is more valuable today. I'll prove it again This book was written in 2013. The biggest stock market crash is still coming. It's here today. We're in emergency. So let me give you the good news, okay? This is the good news. The beautiful thing about this word here, emergency, there. See, out of this emergency, you can emerge. You can become better, smarter, richer. I want you to get richer. That's how you emerge here. So I'm going to explain how you get richer, how you emerge. Because one of the things I dislike about school is they teach us nothing about money. That's not a mistake. And I'll read you the back of this book here. This is from the Capitalist Manifesto. We've been warned for years. This is from Nikita Khrushchev. He is the premier of the Soviet Union. In 1959, when I was in school, he said to us, he said this to Americans, your children's children will live under communism. We're there today. Anyway, he says, your children's children will live under communism. You Americans are so gullible. No, you Americans are so gullible. No, you won't accept communism outright. Okay, so that's exactly what he said. He said communism would come in two stages. 1930 was the first stage, when the Berlin School sent teachers to Columbia University in New York City, and our teachers became communists. So when I read this book in 1965, I was in New York, I realized my family and most school teachers are communists. They're not bad people. That's like you're saying, well, you're a Muslim, you're a Catholic, you're a Buddhist. Not bad people, it's just different religion. So it says, your children's children will live under communism. You Americans are so gullible. No, you won't accept communism outright, but we will keep feeding you small doses of socialism until you finally wake up and find you already have communism. We're already here. Communists have taken over the free world. We're no longer a free market economy. You will finally wake up and find out you already have communism. We will not have to fight you. We will so weaken your economy. This is 1959. As the Soviet Union was crashing, he was warning us. Khrushchev was warning us. Until you fall like overripe fruit into our hands. And that's why I wrote this book here.
The first wave of inflation hurt. The second wave could break the system. It's already here. Tariffs are quietly pushing up prices on auto parts, appliances, electronics, and by the fall, we could get hit with a brutal 1-2 punch. Skyrocketing prices and slowing economy, most people will wait. They'll trust Washington and hope it all works out. That's how they get crushed. Here's the truth. Tariffs are already pushing prices higher, inflation eats away at your cash, and the U.S. is drowning in nearly $37 trillion of debt. I don't sit in paper promises. I stay in real assets. Gold, silver. Gold is up over 29% this year. Silver is up over 28%. And experts believe both could shatter new records as the dollar continues to lose value. There's a legal way to move part of your retirement into physical gold and silver, tax-free, penalty-free. That's why I work with my friends at Priority Gold. I trust them. They know the playbook, and they can show you exactly how to do it step by step. Call 866-703-9895 and ask for the 2025 Rich Dad Wealth Defense Guide or text GUIDE to 24999 right now. No pressure, just the facts you need before the next wave hits. I'm ready. What about you? Text GUIDE to 24999 or call 866-703-9895 now to get your free Wealth Defense Guide.
We're crashing right now. We're in serious trouble. Now, the good news is you can emerge. Like I said, there's a million ways you can get rich. Like, I still invest. I don't invest in oil stocks. I invest in oil wells. I don't invest in food. I invest in cattle. You know, I invest in Wagyu cattle. Why Wagyu cattle? Because the rich will always be rich. The poor will eat hamburger, cheap meat, but the rich will always eat brand meat. Wagyu is a brand. But anyway, today I buy breeding bulls. So I'm getting richer. Every time that breeding bull has sperm, we sell the sperm. Capitalism, free market capitalism, and they pay a premium for that bull to do that stuff. Open your minds. There's more opportunity today, and you can emerge rich. And I'll say it again, the trouble with the real estate market crashing, it takes everything with it. Our pensions are gone. This is not good news. So I'll be finishing up by talking about how you fight back as a capitalist. So you can emerge out of this thing richer, happier, smarter. These are the 4 things I suggest to you. Be careful who your teachers are, because this is your most powerful, most valuable asset is your brain. And if you have poor teachers, you're in serious trouble. Be careful who your teachers are. If they're Marxists, be careful. So you want to choose your teachers. I had to choose my rich dad versus my poor dad. As I said, my poor dad's a good man. He was the head of education for the state of Hawaii, PhD, Stanford, Northwestern, University of Chicago. Very good man, but he was a Marxist. He believed, like most Marxists believe, in the abolition of private property. He said that my poor dad always said the rich were evil. The rich were greedy. You listen to people like teachers like Klaus Schwab, you're in trouble. But millions of people are, because most teachers are Marxists. I hate to say that, but they are. They're not bad people. They really believe in what they're teaching. They teach the rich are evil, the rich are greedy, and you should all die. Diversity, inclusion, equality. That's stupid. I want to be rich. You want to be equal? Go someplace else. I've always wanted to be rich. That's why I like breeding bulls, you know. I like to have the breeding bull because they produce more calves. They produce more cows. They produce more capital. Cattle comes from the word capital. So that's why I invest in breeding bulls. You should too. They're really good. Next thing is skills. You're looking for teachers that will give you new skills. And so one of the reasons we created here the cash flow board game is to give you new skills. And some of you have played it, some of you haven't, but this here is, you know, the rat and all this stuff here. It used to have a Ferrari on it. But anyway, this here is the board game from the inside. And the reason I do this is because my rich dad taught me to be a capitalist playing Monopoly. You know, 4 greenhouses, 1 red hotel. Today I own thousands and thousands of rental properties. I own hotels, I own all that stuff. So this here is the cash flow board game. It's produced all over the world. When you go to school, you wind up here. It's called the rat race. Go round and around and around and around and around. And you wonder, what happened to my life? And today, because they have bad teachers, they're stuck in here. You know, like I said, all the teachers are there for their pensions, and it's stolen. They're being stolen. So how do you get out of the rat race? This is the real game board here. It's called a financial statement. And so in school, this is called accounting. And when I was in business school, there was no subject more boring than accounting. So in 1994, 96, we created the cash flow board game so you could learn this. And again, this is for new teachers, but you need new skills. You need the skills of how you run a bookkeeping, accounting. So this game teaches these skills here. This is a balance sheet, income statement, statement of cash flow. Now the reason this is a better teacher, again, let me go back to this here, is because As Maria Montessori said, she's an educational entrepreneur. She says, what the hand does, the mind remembers. So the reason this board game is such a great teacher is because you have to fill this out with your hands. You have a pencil, you're putting numbers in here, you're filling these numbers out. So let me say it again. As Maria Montessori said, what the hand does, the mind remembers. The game is a teacher. It'll teach you new skills. So you have income statement, balance sheet, statement of cash flow. This here is the most important person on this game board. It's called the auditor. You know what it's called today in real life? Blockchain. The auditor is blockchain. So what gives crypto its power is because of auditor, blockchain. And the cash flow game, again, is a great teacher teaching you new skills here. So I would suggest getting the game, get together with 3 or 4 people, play the game. Play it once a week for 1 year, and you'll see a whole different world. But remember the auditor. The auditor is blockchain. The most important thing you can do is when you fill this out here, you have to pass it to the next player, and the player audits your numbers here. In real life, I have all audited financial statements. That's how I can take companies public. That's why I'm an entrepreneur. I have auditors auditing my books here. So when you play this game here and you're having a good time and you're learning, you have kids here, people find out very quickly that kids are liabilities, not assets. They're very expensive here. One more thing, I talk about my Ferrari. The wonderful thing about my Ferrari is the way I get my Ferrari is I buy an asset. So I buy, let's say, an apartment house, and the apartment house buys my Ferrari. That's how you get rich. That's called capitalism. You want to learn capitalism, not Marxism from a school teacher. So the reason we have this board game here is so you can have fun. If you play it once a month for 10 times with your friends, you'll find your mind opening up, because what you're gaining is you have a new teacher, but you're getting new skills. And that's what makes you rich, not a college degree. The next thing that's vitally important is information here. And the reason this is important is very simply because misinformation, they're also called lies. Be careful. Be careful of the information, who your teachers are, what your skills are, and all this, because misinformation is it. Another thing, there was a man named George Orwell. He wrote the book 1984. Very important statement in there. And these guys use it all the time today. He says, when you can't win the argument, change the story. Misinformation says, well, no. There's no inflation. They change the story. I call it lies. So again, the world, America, the US dollar, all fiat currency. We're in serious emergency here. And again, I want to toot my own horn. I said it was going to come in 2013. It's here today. So what they're doing is when they didn't pay off the first crash in 2008, they borrowed more money to pay off the debt. Then they borrowed more money to buy the bonds to pay off the debt. And they kept interest rates low, and they blew the world into this huge bubble. So you have a stock market bubble, we have a bond bubble, we have a real estate bubble, and the world's going to go crashing. I cover in this book here. It was coming all these years, 2013. So remember, you don't have to be a victim. You got to learn from capitalists. So anyway, so be careful of misinformation. They're also called lies. So the reason you want to be staying ahead is be careful on the source of your information. So when I say I wrote this book here, I can prove it. Here's the book, 2013. I'm not just saying the crash is coming. I can prove I wrote the book. You'll find me on CNN calling for the crash of Lehman Brothers and all this. Just go to Rich Dad. I've been calling this stuff for years here. I have proof. It's not misinformation. And the final, the most important thing is who is on your team. I'm a U.S. Marine. When we went into battle, I flew the gunships. We always went and we flew as teams. So when we fought as teams. What did they tell you to do in school? Go by yourself. If you ask for help in school, you're called cheating. In the military, it's called teamwork. So the other thing that you want to stay ahead in this economy as we go into this time here, huge emergency, I suggest use the cash flow game as a great teacher, learn new skills, be careful of the information going into your head, and when you're playing the cash flow game, you'll find out whether or not that person should be on your team. You don't want a communist on your team. You don't want a school teacher on your team. Because the problem with a school teacher is they think their grades matter. They think, oh, but I was a straight A student. I had good grades. You don't want that person on your team because what did your grades have to do in school? So the most important thing here is when you're playing the cash flow game, educate each other, play the cash flow game, study, learn, seek information. There's more opportunity than ever before. You know, I tell you too right now, I have oil wells and I have Japanese bulls. And I'm getting richer and richer and richer. I also own apartment houses. I use debt as money. I drive Ferraris because I like Ferraris. But I also have a fabulous team here. On my team are my bookkeepers, accountants, attorneys, and all that. I have a great team. My poor dad, a school teacher, nobody. I'm an A student, so I'm the smartest person in the world. I don't need anybody because I'm an A student. That's the problem with a school teacher. They think their grades matter. They actually think their grades matter. What's wrong with those people? Do you know what I'm saying? And the worst thing about it is they don't make mistakes. Well, how in the world do you learn if you don't make mistakes? The reason you want to play the cash flow game is to make mistakes. You make mistakes with fake money, play money. The more mistakes you make, the smarter you get. But most teachers, they think, oh, I made no mistakes, that's why I'm smart. No, that's why you're stupid. Tell the teacher that. You make no mistakes, that's why you're stupid. That's why you're poor. Be careful who's on your team. In the Marine Corps, we made sure we had a great team. There was 2 pilots on my aircraft, 2 officers, 2 machine gunners, they were enlisted guys, and 1 crew chief. We flew as a team. We also flew with other aircraft. We went into battle, we fought as teams. It's like a rugby team or a soccer team. Most people are golfers. I'm gonna do it by myself. You want the best team. You do that, you will win. So I'll be closing with this thing here. It goes back to this here. This is your most important teacher. Learn to do this. Learn with play money, fake money. Make as many mistakes as possible. Teach each other. Teach each other. If somebody doesn't want to learn, get them off your team. You want somebody who understands this on your team. Because I'll leave the final words on this. You know, I flunked out of high school twice. Why? Because I can't write. Now, ironically, my books, I'm an international bestseller, but in high school I couldn't write, made too many mistakes. But let me say this much. When I was flunking out of high school, my rich dad said this to me, and I'll pass it on to you. My rich dad said to me, he says, Robert, my banker has never asked me for my report card. My rich dad never went to school. He said, but when I go to my banker, they want to see my financial statement. I'll say it again, okay? Most school teachers don't have one of these things. That's why they're poor. So when I was flunking out of high school back in the 60s, my rich dad said, my poor dad was all upset because he was an A student, you know, PhD and all this stuff. My rich dad says to me, he says, Robert, this is what my banker wants to see. My banker wants to see my financial statement because your financial statement is your report card when you grow up. Ladies and gentlemen, grow up. This is what your banker wants to see. Play the cash flow game. Pay at least once a month. Teach people. Find your team. Learn. Don't be fooled by misinformation. But remember this is your report card when you grow up. I promise you, if you play this game once a month for a year, and you teach people along the way, you'll find your team, but you'll also get richer because you're richer up here. So good luck. We're in very serious trouble financially, but guess what? Your banker only wants to see this. This is your report card when you grow up. Thank you.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.